As you can see, yeah, I'm from Slovenian State University, and I'm also a member of the board of DANET, which is, as you know, based in Ulm. And my title is a little bit different, but the topic is there. Anyway, I would like to start by saying that outreach programs, reaching out to socially deprived or disadvantaged or vulnerable groups, goes on in different areas, mostly in the area of welfare and social work, which is understandable, also in the field of art, where some techniques like learning by body is used, or are used. And the area I'm interested in and I'm coming from is adult education. Well, I would like to start by saying that outreaching to these vulnerable groups means identifying these groups, because they are not always there. For example, functionally illiterate people do not have an address. We don't have groups of functionally illiterate people. We have to identify them. And outreaching is also about approaching these groups. So there are different techniques to do it, and about assisting these groups, assisting vulnerable and socially disadvantaged groups. And what is our aim here? To integrate them into society. And sometimes, for example, in the case of older people, when they get retired, we want them to remain integrated in the society, because they are as we know, some of them are at risk of being marginalized. We already discussed it. We have already discussed it, Carmen. It's all about connotations of this term. The term is English. It's outreach, but in different languages, there are different priorities, which tell a lot about what we want to achieve with reaching out to these groups. It all depends, the priorities depend on the country and on the culture. For example, in French, France is very centralized, as we know, it means radiating from the center to all directions. And this is typical of the French situation. There is a central organization, and then all of a sudden they create a whole network of organizations which are for these vulnerable groups, and which address also, most of the times, also social issues. It is also about transcending, which means getting better, getting beyond the borders, beyond what people expect. And this is particularly true of these vulnerable groups. I mean, they are in a situation in which they think that the situation is right, and they don't want to go beyond the borders set. It is also about, particularly in French language, it's about increasing sensitivity to marginalized groups. I remember that once there was a group of boys who attacked a girl, and they put her on fire. And this was in one of the suburbs of Paris. And they got an animator, a lady which later became a minister, And they created a network of such organizations, increasing sensitivity to the position of migrant women in the suburbs. And it is also about perceiving and understanding these groups. So the outreach programs address the vulnerable individuals and groups, but they also want society to perceive them, to understand them better, to get in touch with them, be it virtually or by, I don't know, newspapers and so on. In German, I don't know if you will agree, it's mostly about social participation. And it is also about the commitment to the public good. And I remember that in the disposition paper of Danet, we focused on social participation of older people. So it's about social participation.
But in German, Dusana, it's all is social participation, everybody, not especially the outreach persons, but including all older people.
Okay. But the focus is on social participation. So we are supposed to participate in society for the common, for the public good. In Italian, it's about mostly about disclosure and involvement of socially deprived or vulnerable groups. So the question is, which meanings and which dimensions should we prioritize in our countries? So all these different dimensions are about reaching out to vulnerable individuals and vulnerable groups. Yeah, so the topic, so why and what for this topic? As you can see, there is just a SIG publication, a SIG book, which is called, which we called empowerment. We didn't call it outreach or outreaching, because for the titles, this would not be, such a title would not be immediately understood. But empowerment, which is another basic task of social workers and adult educators and so on, is much better understood, at least in this country. And there is a philosophy behind outreach and empowerment, that we all are entitled to participate in society, and we all are entitled to have cognitive and other abilities, to acquire cognitive and other abilities to do it. So outreaching is based on humanistic values, definitely. It's not about, I don't know, economic values. It's not about profit, trade, and so on. It's about humanistic values. And what we want in reaching out to these groups with programs of adult education, for example, we want these groups, these individuals, to acquire knowledge, to acquire skills, and above all, self-confidence for active co-creating their individual and social existence. So it's for bettering individual lives, and it's for bettering them as social beings. So there is this double aim, double objective. And I can tell it right away. At Slovenian Srdić University, we have been having for 42 years now this double objective, bettering the individual and bettering their social existence and their social value and position in society. And what we want with outreaching is always there. We want these groups and these individuals become more visible. So, therefore, what they do have to be very professional. They have to be ambitious. They have to be based on theory and knowledge and so on, just because they are at the edge of society. I remember when we were celebrating the 30th anniversary of Slovenian Third Age University, we had a celebration, and the president of the state came, and the minister of culture, and so on. And we prepared a program which was, yes, highly professional in all ways. And one of the colleagues from the ministry said to me, "But it's so professional." And I felt offended, because we are people who work in civil organizations, can be and are very, very well educated, and they have to be very motivated. They have to be very experienced, much more than people in the public sector, or some people in the public sector. So I felt somehow offended, but this was what she said was meant as a compliment. Yeah, I would just like to tell you that. Well, in this presentation, I will be talking about older people and other vulnerable groups. I will be talking about adult education, culture, mostly cultural heritage, and local development. So I will be addressing the problem of developing local capacity. What people, organizations, and so on in a locality can do due to what they know, what they learn, what they want, and so on. It's about people. It's not about an organization top down and so on. So in 1984, 42 years ago, we established and developed Slovenian Third Age University, and there is a network of 52 universities right now all over the country. So we can talk about radiation. We can be French from this point of view. In 1985, we established, some of us were working in the department of andragogy at the University of Ljubljana, and we set up a summer school for adult educators. It was about education for adult educators for local development. So this was quite early, I would say, and the school was receiving the best lecturers from the whole world who taught us a lot. And we were located in a small town, Ajdovščina, which is now the best developed town in the country from the point of view of social welfare and so on. So I think we have, during 10 years, 10 summers, we have contributed a lot to the present situation. Then with the National Institute of Adult Education, we introduced study circles. It's a network which is spread all spread all over the country, and the idea came from Sweden from 1906, so quite early, when but it was somehow transformed or intensified in our country. We connected education in study circles where people contribute their knowledge and so on, with local development. So whatever they do, and this is also the case at Slovenian Third Age University quite often, it's not only about education. There should be some impact for the public good. And of course, for 40 years, we have been engaged first in international projects and European projects. So this is our history, the history of how we acquired and how all people who work in the area acquire their knowledge. It can be, and it should be, there should be theory behind, of course, but a lot of empirical findings. Yeah. So the objectives of these outreach programs and of outreach and empowerment are, of course, to alleviate social marginalization and social inequality. And this is, in general, an important objective of non-formal adult education. We can alleviate, we can't get rid of social marginalization, but at least we can make it less difficult. So it's about empowerment and it's about outreach. These are the two social tasks which are extremely important. And empowerment always dwells on humanistic values. And it requires as well raising awareness. I don't know about you, but I had some problems with understanding this term empowerment at the beginning. And finally, through different studies, I came to the conclusion that it's about giving power in politics, giving power in psychology, giving power in through organizational skills and so on. So it's for individuals and it's for groups and it's also for general audiences which are in the mainstream. We all need to have some power on different levels. And I would use here a statement given by Rossi Braidotti. She's an Italian philosopher. And she says, we are all relegated to relationships between power on one hand, social inclusion and social exclusion. I don't know how you understand this statement of hers, but I think especially in our fragmented society, in our dynamic society, if you want, we do not have a stable position. We think we have it, but we don't have it. And we are always in the relationships between power, between power, social, between power, social inclusion, and social exclusion. So this is a very dynamic process. We can see it especially in big companies. People who can be very important one day and the next day they are relegated somewhere and so on. Yeah, probably you know these names. even if you are not in the field of adult education or social work, there is Paolo Freire, who wrote Pedagogy of the Oppressed. Carmen, you absolutely know it, I'm sure. He discusses empowerment, and he said that people who are oppressed, shall we say vulnerable groups and individuals and so on, they simply accept their situation. Some of them think that enrolling in a university program, no, that's not for me. There are some borders which we have to transcend, as I have said. And empowerment is always, according to Freire, an educational process, which has objectives to increase social fairness, social justice, and to trigger social transformation. So there should be adult education for more social fairness, and as a consequence, there is this social transformation. And I can give you an example from what we have done in this country. When we started working in the field of older people, there was nothing, really nothing, for social development and engagement of older people. And finally, after some decades, I asked myself, but have we done, what have we done in reality? And all of a sudden, comparing the beginnings and comparing the situation now, I could understand that we have done a lot, because today the situation of older people is different, also due to lots of other influences, of course. The situation of older people is different. Their social roles are different. Education of older people has become a public due, if you want. There are many organizations dealing with older adult education, even if they are not specialized only in this area. So a lot has been done. And when we started 40 years ago, our programs were for older people. We thought that there were topics in which older people would not be interested in, which is not the case. People of any age are today interested in social and other issues. And Paolo Freire, he also introduced, focused on the role of critical thinking, which is a great problem nowadays. Checking the documents, going deeper into problems before getting to a judgment and so on. So this and much more is critical thinking. Yeah, another theorist is Edward Christian Lindemann, and he's supposed to be a social philosopher, and he wrote just one book, no, some books, but mostly The Meaning of Adult Education. And he was also the first to write on community development, which means local capacity, education for community and by people and organizations who are in a community and so on. And he's also an early explorer of group work. And he worked to extend popular education, as Grundtvig and others we know. Now, I would like to say that each country has its own people, outstanding personalities who are involved in the development of vulnerable groups and other groups and the whole society. And in Slovenia, this is Janez Evangelist Krek, which you don't know, I'm sure. But anyway, he said that finding the right relation between freedom and authority is a primary social task. So finding the right relation between freedom and authority is a primary social task. Recently, I have attended a lecture on the poverty of older people. And a huge national research has been done. What comes out as a finding that marginalization can be or cannot be a matter of just one generation. Exclusion, marginalization go from one generation to another. And there is a French researcher, Esther Duflo, and she is specialized in, they call it development, but in fact, she is specialized in poverty, globally speaking. And her definition of poverty and marginalization is that if you are poor, you have, everything you have is less. You have less education, less health, less possessions, less more narrow social circle, and so on. And it goes from one generation to another. If the government, if the state does not help, and can help a lot. Yeah, I would just like to enumerate some groups, vulnerable groups we have addressed in our publication Empowerment, which I showed at the very beginning. Well, it all depends on the authors, but usually if you go to your national legislation, you will see who are vulnerable groups, seen from the point of view, as they are seen by the government. There are always prisoners, there are Roma people, there are refugees, there are older people, and so on. And even not that. For example, in the times of the government of Nicolas Sarkozy, the French president, so there were people of after retirement were not considered as a vulnerable group. Well, in our publication, we address different groups. Libraries discussed the non-readers whom they want to reach. Then there were groups of vulnerable young people who are approached by field work, then young people who are approached by youth work. There is also rural population. There's a big difference between the city and rural population by using citizen science initiatives. And one of our third-age university, which functions in a very small locality, has collected objects and texts and so on, and made a publication and set up a museum devoted to a local tailor. And they collected stories about him and so on. And now this is, it's for public good. It is, of course, exhibited. And this has become a kind of public institution. Then people in need of guidance, professional guidance, shall we say, and psychological counseling. Then there are low literate families, which are being discussed in this publication. There are also kindergarten children preparing for lifelong learning. There are the deaf. In one of our projects, 4 elements in arts, we dealt with the deaf people, and the texts produced by some deaf professionals and university teachers and so on. And we learned a lot about the need for older people to have their sign language recognized. They want their sign language to be all around in different organizations and public space and so on. The blind, of course, older people. I have worked recently with women suffering from economic violence in families. It is all about understanding manipulation, which also pertains to finances and so on. Then marginalized groups, which were approached by specialized libraries, and the role of journalists in dealing with marginalized groups. And if you work with such groups, you will understand that language that is used in relation to these groups matters. It's important. We have seen it during the COVID crisis. I don't know. I think the situation was more or less the same in Germany and in France and so on. Older people were named in very different ways. They were the elderly, which means necessarily people who are fragile and so on. And also the way they were portrayed and so on were this was an intensive marginalization. And we have also found out that during social crisis, social interruptions, the situation of the socially marginalized groups and individuals becomes much more difficult. And we have to, we have to fight back some rights. Anyway, when we work with socially marginalized groups, we have to think about how to attract them to adult education. This is a big problem. This is not for me. I have too much work. It's too far away. I don't have the money necessary, and so on. So these are the usual barriers we also come across in adult education as well. So we have to think about how to attract potential learners. In our case, we did it. We approached individuals and we said, "Come next time with a friend of yours," and they came, and so on. So we have to get familiar with the issues and the realities and the feelings of our target group. And we should involve different organizations. This is very important for local development. And then we have to think about engaging and educating about the program itself, which has to be planned to a certain extent, but it also has to be open to what pops up from the side of learners. So the learning methods have to be engaging. Cognitive learning is not enough. Lectures are not enough, or not enough at all. And our aim here is are the same as the ones cited by Jacques Delors. We want these learners to be better off in their everyday life, to know, to get some knowledge, to do things. This is very important. And to learn how to be together. I remember a headmaster from a school, elementary school, who during the COVID period said, our children, our pupils want to come back to school because it's not only about getting knowledge, it's also about learning how to be together. And the same goes for everyone. People who learn, who are from these groups, they also appreciate to be together and to learn how to be together. We in this area are used methods to make the groups known and visible and engaged with the local environment. We can't go into that. I mean, it's a whole area. But anyway, if I go back to attracting the potential learners, talking about them, making them visible, we have to choose the right words. The words matter. And recently I have participated in a meeting on these different names attached to older people and aging and so on. It really is very important. And it is important to call older people old people. Because this is, there are young people, there are old people, there are people in the middle. If we try to use words which is very popular in Germany, for example, seniors and so on. Senior to what, to whom? We don't know. I mean, people are old, and I'm speaking about myself, I'm old. And together with other experts in aging and old age, we decided that old people would be the most convenient word to use. Approaching these groups, we have to penetrate into their true otherness, the otherness of vulnerable individuals, because this is the source of their specific needs. They have common needs and they have specific needs, which we have to understand. We have to understand, of course, like always in adult education, interests and desires. And on all this, we built our outreach programs. But I would also like to emphasize that potential participants in education depend on the policies, depend on the knowledge, enlightenment, and commitment of those who shape the policies. So it is very important to work with decision makers, to be close to them. And I think, Carmen, you are doing a great job in approaching all of these organizations and individuals on who have to be enlightened and on whose commitment depend the policies as well. These groups depend on the sensitivity and understanding of journalists. We have been educating journalists for 4 decades, and still, from time to time, there are problems. And editors are also important. And educators are very important, who have to gain to share the values, the true values, and the trust, and who have a knowledge of how to build different communities. I was talking about the visibility of vulnerable social groups. So all our methods, all our contents have to be such as to increase knowledge and skills, and above all, self-confidence. Older people should know a lot about older people, should know a lot about themselves to become valuable persons in discussions about what older people need and who they are, because they can be extremely valuable. They can talk about an aspect of, it can be a scientific aspect in different areas in which they are involved. Nobody can talk better about older people than older people themselves, on condition they get the knowledge and the basic ideas on which to build their messages. And this is, for example, one of the two exhibitions. This one was in the public space. It was about the position of older people in city space. So what they think about the city, what should be preserved in a city, what is valuable for the identity of older people, and so on. So this is one example of visibility, and there was, of course, another exhibition which was called City 65 Plus, between retreat and urbanity, because older people can either withdraw from public life, or they can become a part of this urban area and urban sphere. So visibility is very important. Cooperation with different organizations. And older people do have, for example, they do have organizational skills which we can profit from. But for local community, it's important to be in cooperation with most different organizations. For example, this group was working with the festival, the Ljubljana Festival, and also the Grammar School for Design and Photography. And they were doing a research, and the results of this research were passed on young people who were involved in the project, in the European project. Yeah, so we've been collecting, I said that words matter, and we've been collecting these different newspaper headings, titles of the articles. There's one, for example, is old age a disease, question mark. Then another article, when life becomes a dried out river, and so on. We have to work with journalists. And for example, education of the retired people is not a hobby. Okay, I mean, we would never have the same title for managers, for people in the middle age. You would never come across such an article. Education of managers is not a hobby. Okay. Yeah. I'll be skipping this one, but anyway, in many European projects, there were issues that really interested us and became a part of our permanent program, and we work in the different directions. For example, visual literacy with the CNH project was important for us. And we started studying this visual literacy in older people, which is an important issue for the whole society, I would say, and also for older people. But we start discussing this problem from the point of view of theirs. And societal issues. So there was CNH, which was on active aging. Refugees in, it was about documentary films and the problem of refugees. There was GGA, which was about volunteering of older people, a topic which we had known a lot about, but in this project, together with our partners, we discovered new aspects. And also the old questions dealt with in a new way. So cultural heritage, we know a lot about it, and Carmen, we have had many projects together in this field. So cultural heritage, especially intangible cultural heritage, to which groups of people attribute a social value. And gender issues, we discussed the problem of older women, and we discovered that older women were not addressed enough in adult education, in older adult education. And most of our students, about 75% are women. But okay, this gender issue was not discussed. And places and space, places are those places in space, in town space or rural space, which are important for the identity of certain groups. And I would like to end up. I know I have probably been too long, but the last sentence and maybe the last lesson: outreach has a transforming effect on educational providers, on educational process, on learners, and finally on the environment. And I think this is important for the topic we wanted to address today. And thank you very much for being so patient. It's difficult. It would be easier to be in real contact.